look at those twigs, and I don't see any surfaces on the twigs the way I see in Hyman Bloom. Like his branches, like he does every branch, and you feel like he made a contract with those branches. And so this looks like a photograph, and it does become a very interesting illusion. And I'm stuck with the word which is, will all the work look like this, or do you feel different in different places? I know Hyman felt different in different places. And I suspect that if I see this and I see that in real, I'll feel the same way. I shouldn't feel the same about a different landscape. I shouldn't feel the same way about changes of location. You see? And so I think what I'm trying to say is your technique is making you go to a landscape of your own Costco.
That's a Hyman Bloom.
Hyman Bloom.
That's
Hyman Bloom?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's Hyman Bloom. And Hyman Bloom comes back from nature, like Turner. He says, man, I saw so much today. And I think in your case, did you see so much today? Were you there long enough to see the changes of light, or how you felt in the atmosphere of sitting there for like hours? Did you? Okay, maybe I'm too harsh.
Hundreds and hundreds of mosquito bites.
All right, good. Well, then get more mosquito bites. But I'm trying to say, I'm trying to say, like, when do you know the material? And when do you give power to the camera to know the material? I think one of the great things about Turner is he suffers going out there. He suffers.
And I intended for it to be a really loose piece, and it just like tight, It's like a magnet. So
I want to say one thing. Somebody yesterday was Bill, the guy with the Van Gogh history. We were talking. He was saying the first time he saw her at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, this very large drawing of Van Gogh of a guy doing like a field work, working in the field. And he said the guy was so clumsy, but he was so sincere. So he really looked at something, and there was nothing except watching the man, watching the activity. And I fear that this really is about technique, and it is very seductive. It's very beautiful. But I want to know more about your feeling about, having been there. Suppose you went there just to draw, and you, on the way to draw, you were so impressed by the drawing and the changes of lighting that you figured, now for once, I wouldn't take a photograph of this, and I will just use my drawings to make more drawings. I think that you would leave your hand and your feelings more intact. I'm trying to say that.
Maybe increase her repertoire
Yeah.
in terms of the way marks are made.
Yes.
If observations were part of it. You look at those Hyman Bloom drawings, and there's quite a repertoire of mark making.
Oh, yes.
And I think that comes from being there.
And he gets into this mystical way of darkness happening too among these places. And the first time I saw them, I spent a lot of time watching them. I said, how did he find the way to see this at once? And the guy did not use a camera. These are from the 50s. And there's some lousy books on these drawings that badly reproduced. And I wish somebody would reproduce them better or exhibit them better, because they are marvelous. They remind me very much of a Dutch guy who was contemporary to Rembrandt called Hercules Segers. Hercules Segers would do landscapes by having gone to a landscape, remembering it, much like the Otto Dix thing, and then making the landscape in his studio. And he would trust his eyes. And I wonder if you could do it. Because I fear your work will be always liked, but will you like your work? That's the whole difference. Where I come from, I don't see the Pacific Ocean. I rarely see the Atlantic Ocean. I've been on the Atlantic, back and forth a few times on boats, freighters and liners. but I was watching that sunset, and it took maybe a half an hour, to see the whole thing go, and the changes of the water. And, if my eyes could talk to me, if they could speak, they would say, "Hey, Jerry, I'm having a great time today. I'm having a great time today." And I wanted to paint that. And then I thought of certain Hudson River people, like Heed, and other people who spend their lives doing the quiet of the coastal shore of the Hudson. And they're beautiful things. They're beautiful things. And they're so private. They're so private. And your work with the church's icebergs, I've seen those when I was a kid, Cooper. They own those whole things, I think. I believe most of them. And he goes out there on a boat and just freezes his nuts off, so to speak, and paints those icebergs. And he's probably saying in every stroke, wow, wow, you find them greens and blues and things. But he's there. He's there. And I really believe, and this is going to sound maybe, romantic, but, since I'm involved with the idea of suffering, and like when I went to Auschwitz, I had to tell myself, do you have the courage to go to a place like that? I don't want to work from photographs. That doesn't say much because it's a photograph. But if I go there, if I go into a lager, or if I go into where they have the ovens, that's a whole different place. I'm going to be different as a person. I'll be new as a person in my reaction to the place. That's why people travel. Turner goes to these incredible places in the Alps because he wants to have that experience on his lungs, in his eyes, in his heart. And I'm not putting down your investigations of time spent in the forest, but I just wish you had a better time there. Like you're a bit too wanting the object or the product and not the experience of maybe you just sit there and don't even make art. Maybe make poetry. Why must you make a picture? I walk a lot in the evening in this forest or scruffy area, and I believed him. I don't think he worked from photographs. I think he worked from remembrances of those places. And I think he was telling the truth. Mm-hmm. I think we depend on the photograph. And you wonder if you don't have the camera, if you could tolerate memory or tolerate clumsiness, And I think that's what mark making is. It's clumsy and it's not sure. And I think the camera could give you only certainty. And that's, I think, the property of the camera, not you. I'm trying to say something here, but I think that's what I want to say. I mean, Van Gogh, when he does these trees that have bumps and lumps, and they move and have life through them, I mean, who else could do that? He had such a wonderful courage to become that tree, the life of that tree. I can't do that, and I admire this.
There's something less plastic about the photograph. And the being in front of the motif forces you to make a plastic image that is, a forceful change in space. It forces you to make decisions that make a much more plastic image. It may not be as necessarily as accurate, if you will, but there's a sense of experience of the space. And I'm saying this as someone who really battles with the photograph.
Yeah.
And I use a lot of photographs and try to combine them in such a way that make that space and hopefully get away from the kind of flatness of the photographic space. I'm sort of almost successful or partly successful sometimes, I think. But there's something about like being there and working that space. And your being here at Jerome is making me think a lot about the space in my paintings and how much more better. How much better it could be, more spatial it could be. I'm looking at your paintings. I'm looking at how you think. I think you can do that with photographs, but you have to, let the photograph be your assistant.
Take a picture of their hands just to kind of get it down. Then I'll get them back so I can finish it. Because I want to make a reaction to the real presence, not the photographic presence in my case. And I think the trouble with too much photography is it does flatten the optical experience. You know, if I'm watching you, the way the light breaks on your topical and the shoulder here, changes of light here. I mean, I want my eyes to have a sense of usefulness, and the physicality of your hair, the strands. I mean, I can react to that because you're here, and I like that. I'm wowed by that. I'm alive with that. But when I have a photograph, to me, it's like, all right, it's a seduction, it's got something, but I'm not as alive with it. For me, maybe other people can. Richard Estes is the photograph. And
yeah.
He knows how to play it.
Took a lot of liberties with those photographs that he used. Yeah.
Ralph Goings and
Yeah.
Sure. I was living in Italy for a long time. And I went to this little odd place in a certain part of Rome on a hill, and there was this wonderful property which was abandoned. And I walked there at moonlight. And I felt that I was gifted by having this beautiful palazzo crumbling and this moonlight in the tree, and I kept watching the tree. And I said to myself, I love the purple light and what's happening in the tree, and I was so taken by it. And then I got home. I eventually had an apartment in the West Village on Bank Street, and for some stupid reason, it was a Saturday night, and I said, I'm going to go to Central Park, and maybe there's a tree at 2 in the morning that I could say, let me look at that tree here, not there. And I wasn't thinking cameras, like standing in front of this tree until I couldn't remember. And so I go to this tree at 2 in the morning, and I forget there's gangs in Central Park on Saturday night. And I'm there, and suddenly I'm surrounded by 15 Puerto Rican guys, and they're a gang. And I'm looking at my tree. I'm more involved with saving my ass than looking at the tree. So they're coming in on me, so 15 guys. And intuitively, maybe it's the grace of God, intuitively, I know that if I make myself totally pathetic, if I start making weird noises and start ripping my clothes and vomiting, they'll leave me alone. And they said in Spanish, I think, something like, let's get out of here. And I went back to the subway, not having seen the tree enough, shaking in my pants, vomit on me, but I was safe.
Wow.
So sometimes locations aren't the best way to go.
A lot of feedback on yet, but I would say in general, like, the main feedback I get from my work is, again, an issue with it being a little too photographic sometimes and needing more of that infusion of life. Like, when you came into my studio and you were attracted to some of the smaller studies, that'll happen a lot. Like, very often I'll have people come into my studio, the big works that I'm really putting my heart and soul into and spending like 40 to 60 hours on, they're gonna like, okay, whatever, and then they see this little thing I did in like 2 hours and they're like, that's it. Like that's the thing. So I think that's where I'm struggling right now is, I have these visuals that I want to communicate and these kind of moods and feelings I want to come across in a larger scale. And it's, how do I get that surface quality there and kind of infuse it with that life that's happening in these studies that I'm doing from life.
How did you feel about the crits of her work when she's also photographic? Mm-hmm. This was done photographic.
The one on the right is done from a photograph. The one from the left is completely from my head.
Okay, all right, that's good. That's good.
But are you asking how?
No, I get the feeling of, I feel that stringent vertical thing, I mean, looking at the water yesterday with my wife, the Pacific Ocean, the loveliness about any ocean is the vastness, the horizontal of it. I mean, in the Bible, they talk about the voice of God is the culmination of all the sounds of thunderish waves crashing down. I mean, great poetics, ocean. I mean, the whole idea of Moby Dick is the idea that so much happens in water, the depths of the water, and it's poetic, it's huge. The Leviathan lives in that depth. It's huge compared to our smallness. We have all these powerful things with ocean, water, nature, especially water. And when you watch those church little studies, they are pretty much horizontal. And they are precious. They are so beautiful. I was such a good painter. And I don't deny the complexity of your mind, complexity of your idea of biology and meaningfulness. I think that's all good. I think you're talking about how to read these things, how to better read your statement. And that's all. I'm hitting a wall here. I want to say something that I admire your complexity and your thought, and I'm still wondering why I don't believe it. I'm not sold. A show at MoMA, well, 14 Americans, I believe, from 50-something. And her name is Lauren, Loren, McIver, McIver. And it's hard to find her work. Maybe you can Google it or something. But her work was very lovely in terms of, things in nature, the veils of color. It really was, she wasn't looking as much as remembering. It's a whole different thing. And I think that the painter who ended up in the box, the painter guy, Frederick.
Oh yeah, you're talking about yeah, that guy.
What's his name?
The romantic German,
What's his name?
guy like
David Friedrich.
Caspar David Friedrich.
Caspar David.
Yeah.
If you see his work, he sets up this idea of this twilight light, where nature is a poetic that is transcendent. It's like got to be this. In J.D. Salinger, in one of his books, he talks about in the evening, between day and the evening, the children can run as fast as Olympian athletes because it's a magical moment. So in his magical moments, he gives you this moonlight, transcendent, where everything is, there's no word for it. It's just very special and very alive. And how he does it, how he remembers that light, it goes back to your thing too. How does he remember that little short window of light between the end of light and darkness? It's amazing. How the hell did he do it? And I think in this case, the majesty of that moment is just, you come off an elevator, like you're waiting, and you're like, well, that's my floor, that's the floor. And I think in terms of, it looks like it's like you're about to open to a larger vista, but you're not, I don't have the sense of the whole place. But just imagine, maybe this is a device thing, maybe it's wrong, but if I took that painting and I put the same height, two 9-footers on this side, and width, and 9-footers this way, I think that, and both of those panels were painted a blue color, so let's say, the blue of that sky coming up. If I had those next to your picture, I would feel like I'm about to see the privilege of the ocean, because you've set up something that might open up. But we only have that. We have a slice. So this slice makes it a slice of the ocean, instead of the possibility of, well, maybe that will happen. As it, I don't know. I would be intrigued to see that. I'd be intrigued to see the idea of hiding the rest of it. There's so much depth of the ocean that you can't help but go up, almost like a fish, like something is here, and then here will be where air is. So if this picture was, if you had another panel the same length of this thing, you had a tall enough wall, and you had a very small space between you and looking, you would have to kind of go, almost like the Darwinian idea of the fish to man. You'd be going from water to air. So I think those devices are possible in that width, but you've got to be pretty inventive with, it's like, it almost becomes like a lot of people study museum installations, how to explain things with images on walls, which I think is a very interesting kind of art form. But I think I would like to see that picture twice as big in terms of its height, but you give me something to look at underneath so that the thing becomes physical as I move through it.
Yeah.
That would hold it, I think. Frustration is such a great gift because it makes you struggle. And their first reaction is, well, I'm so frustrated. It means I'm stopping. Well, if you're frustrated, it means you have something that you have to overcome and work through. And I think I'm glad you're having problems because that's what we have to follow out the problem, solve it. And I think that your sense of poetic and your sense of a lot of heavy stuff is going to pay off. But we have to work that out. Again, in the Bible, I'm always taken by the story of the angel wrestling with one of the stories, I forget which one, but they wrestle from night to morning. The wrestling. And that's what I think they always do. I'm shocked when a painting of mine comes easy. And I've had some fast paintings, and I think, my God, does that mean my next one's going to be, it's going to torture me to death? So you get lucky. Who is the person who wrestles with the angel in the Bible? Jacob. Jacob. Yeah. And I always love that story because that's what we do. I know this is going to be weird, but I know that between 28 and 32, a lot of people are making breakthroughs, and they happen to be in grad school at that period of time too. I think that's all good. That's why people go to grad school. Because they need the time to figure out this wrestling match with their own ideas. And I think after 32, maybe 36, 37, you're in with the work. I think that's how it works. I don't go with the idea that somebody's 21 and has the privilege of showing at the Whitney. I think those biennials are kind of fake because they're talking about youth knows something that maturity doesn't know. I think that's bullshit. I think maturity is what we live towards, the resolution. Young Rembrandt pictures are interesting, but they're not as profound as the late Rembrandts. And our society says, it's flashy, it's new, it's hot, but that's a description of a magazine, not of works of art. It's flashy.